Hello friends, it's Lisa, and I'm here today with a new video, and it's a super awesome video. It's 3D stencils and gel printing. Now, this first part I'm going to show you a quick gel printing overview in case you haven't ever done it before. This was my first time, so here you can see I'm using very thin copy paper. I got the cheapest kind I could find at Walmart. And then I'm also using this gel press stamping plate and some Sheena Douglas 3D stencils from Crafter's Companion. I tried a bunch of different things. I gel pressed for like 2 hours and had a lot of fun. Today I'm really only going to show you a couple of my end results, and you can kind of get where I'm going, where I went with everything else. I'm showing you the best of what I did. There'll be some more photos at the end that you can look through all the other things I created. My goal was to gel press through the 3D stencils and create the look. I ended up not really being able to do that, but I did use a bunch of other stencils to create the backgrounds, and then used the 3D stencils to stencil the paint on the backgrounds. You'll see. But to actually gel press, what you need to do is take a little bit of acrylic paint. I put way too much on this first one, and use a brayer to get it all over. Now here you can see I'm trying to grab some of that ink or some of the paint through the stencil. I give up trying to clean all my stencils, and now they all just have acrylic paint on them, but it's easy peasy. The stencil actually helps you create some texture. This is the first card we're going to walk through, and it was right after I'd done what I just showed you, and I'm putting some yellow and some red Dilutions paint. For all of the paint that I used for the gel printing portion of this is Dilutions, and it's her first release. So I don't think I show each thing, but and here, this page isn't actually going to be used in any of the video today, but I wanted to show you can get really cool second and third generation prints. Now, what I'm trying to do here is create black around this stencil mask, and this is going to be the flower. I think it was because this paint is so thin and fluid, which is great for a lot of other things, but trying to do this blackout technique just didn't really work. I'll fix it in a minute, but you can see generally the idea is I put the mask down, put all the paint around it, and then I'm just picking up what I wanted. I do use my roller to really press down onto the gel plate. The longer you leave it on the gel press and the better coverage you get with pressure, the better print you're going to be able to pull. So now I went and bought some heavy body black acrylic paint to be able to really blacken up around the edges. So I'm putting the stencil back in place, and I'm going to redo this, but not with the gel press. I'm just going to dauber it on. You can see here I'm just dropping some down and gonna pick it up with my blending tool. I ended up not really liking using the blending tool for acrylic paint. It was just really messy, and I didn't like it. This is not how I plan to be using paint anymore, but that's just me. So I'm going through and doing all the edges around. I really want it to be nice and black, so there's a really good contrast between what is the flower and what is not the flower. After that dried, I pulled the mask off and I put this second layer stencil. Now the first layer is going to be the outline, basically the negative of that mask that I just had on there. But since I already had the background, I didn't need to use that first layer. So I just went straight to the second layer, and I knew from the colors I have of acrylic paint that this pink was really the best second step, because there's 3 steps in each of these 3D stencils. And I knew I was going to use the purple for the last step, but I didn't have a kind of mid-tone. I felt like the pink wasn't going to quite be what I wanted. So I mixed in a little bit of black, and that's something you can easily remember to do. You don't have to have every color. You can mix your colors to get the color that you want. So here I have this darker pink color that's going to be a little bit more opaque than if I hadn't used the heavy body black acrylic. And I'm just stenciling it through with a baby wipe. And I liked the baby wipe technique more than using the ink blender tool, just because you kind of get the same thing, but it's not quite as messy. You do see that my hands get pretty dirty through the whole process, but I think that's just something that happens when you use paint. So I go through and just daub it on. One thing to remember is you want just enough paint to cover up the layer below it, but not enough to like soak and smush under the stencil or to warp the paper. You have to remember, to do the gel press, you want thin paper so that you can get through the stencils, but you also, when you put a lot of paint on any kind of paper, it tends to warp and have issues. So you can have, it's a balancing act. And I loved being able to use this stencil and get such cool techniques over the gel press. Now I ran out of the baby wipes, so I had to go back to using the paint dauber. When you're using the Dylusions paints, you're not supposed to put a whole lot onto the paint dauber, but trying to get through the stencil, I had to put a little bit more, which I don't think I would have had the like gooping issues that I did if I'd used the recommended amount of paint, but I also wouldn't have been able to get through the stencils. So I think just all in all, I don't really plan to be using the paint daubers for stenciling. You can see here I didn't perfectly align the third stencil, so it's a little bit off, but it still looks fine. Next, I'm going to show you this technique that I did, and it basically, I did the reverse, did a similar technique that I did in the last card or the last sheet, except for I did not put the second and third generation stencils on top. So it's just kind of the mask of this. So anyway, I put down this really cool Art Deco-y stencil and grabbed it. There is a print or two below this one, but I didn't capture them on video. So I'm pulling up this print, and I just wanted to show you that I think this was one of my favorite prints of the whole printing experience, and it was just a second generation print that I'd done from the purple. The longer you let the paper stay on the gel press block, the better print you're going to pull up. and it just looks really cool. So you can see that in the photos at the end. What I did here is I added some of the yellow to the print, and this top print is the one that we're actually talking about right now, and I'm just pulling the paint off of the stencil. So I'm not going to get a perfect print or anything like that, but I'm going to get some of that yellow texture and a little bit of the print. Now, I wanted some more color on here, but I wanted not to cover up everything that I had. So I put a little bit of this pink down. You can see it's real translucent. And I tried to pull up a print from that through this Art Deco stencil again. And it was bad. It looked ugly. So I added it down again, and I was hoping maybe that would help, and it didn't. And it didn't. But I just kept adding layers until I liked it, and you'll see that in a minute. Here I'm adding some more purple because I had the colors on there, the purple, the yellow, the pink, all kind of work together visually, and I didn't want to add a random color like green in there, kind of throw off my whole design. But you can see I just kept adding prints until I liked how it looked, and that was here. So next I'm adding this mask on top, and since the stencil was see-through, I was able to just line it up with the circle design that's within the stamp. And I just taped it down. For the mask of the sunflower, I just did the very bottom, and then I used some of this heavy body black acrylic paint and just daubed all around it. Next, we have this beautiful hydrangea print that I ended up doing, and I started out with a blue, aqua to blue gradient through a through the stencil, and what I just picked up the positive from the stencil. Next, I'm using some yellow and white paint to do the same exact thing, except for instead of picking up the positive stencil design, I'm going to pick up the negative stencil design. And I really like how using the paints and kind of mixing the colors to about here. You can still get a lot of different variation, but it all kind of melts together. So here I'm going to add the same exact stencil on top, and I'm going to pull a print from here. I'm trying to kind of line up the stencil design, but it does get a little off center or shifted to the side, which actually makes it look even cooler. So I wanted to make sure I got each little individual thing, so I'm using my finger to press it in and pull it up. You can see it looks really cool. Next, I wanted to add some dots because why not add dots? And I wanted in a contrasting color. That's something you may notice is that in the backgrounds, I'll do warm colors, and in the foreground or the main image, I'll do cool colors, or vice versa. Just because, now it's good to use the same colors throughout, but it's also, if you get the contrast of the colors, you're able to do a lot of stuff. So here I'm trying to decide what stencil I'm going to use, and I kind of audition them out. And I ended up going with the hydrangeas, and I think that was a really good decision. So, and it covers most of the dots, which you'll see, but you do get a lot of the dots kind of haloing around the two hydrangea images, and it looks really nice. In this first and second layer stencil, you'll see kind of some cross hatching, you can add that in, but I already had a lot going on in the background, so I didn't. I just didn't put ink around. Now, since I don't have a whole lot of acrylic paints, and especially not any heavy body ones, I knew I needed to get some white down so that my colors would pop and I wouldn't see the background through the main image. So here I am using some white gesso so that it would mask out or really deaden the background colors. Since I have a really vibrant background, I want to also have a vibrant foreground, and I couldn't do that if you could see the background. So I put some green through, and now I am baby wiping this teal through. You'll be able to see I use some of the baby wipe juices to make it thinner, make the paint even thinner. So it kind of allows some of the white to seep through because I didn't want as dark of the blue as I would have gotten if I hadn't done that. So I just go through, and with the baby wipe, I had a lot of control over where the paint went. Just trying to make sure I have a good texture on there, since this is the layer you're going to see the most of. And I was careful to pull up the masking tape. And the masking tape I had put on my shirt so it would get a little less sticky, but I didn't want it to rip the paper. So I let that dry and then pulled it back over with the second layer stencil, which is really easy to line up once you have the first layer down. They're pretty simple. And then I used the blue. And the baby wipes are gone by this point, so back to using the dauber. It was harder to control than the baby wipe, so I did get a few blue spots in places I didn't really want them, but there's so much going on in this print that it doesn't matter. It's not a very light watercolor thing where it's gonna really matter. So next I'm gonna heat dry it a little bit and on low, and just to kind of dry it up. If I did it on high and really close to the paper, the paint might bubble. But you can see I'm holding up the paper. That allows the heat to pass through, and it dries it without hurting the paper or the paint too much. So just heating it because I was ready to do this last layer. I think this was the very last or second to last thing I did. So I decided to use purple, a little bit of the purple to really get the darkest areas. And I'll pull it off in just a second. You'll be able to see how cool it looks. And you'll be able, go ahead and go to my blog if you want to look closer at all these prints that I made today. And it'll really inspire you to try this out. So just so cool. So cool. Here is the sunflower, and I did almost the same thing as this last card, but I thought I'd show you one more time just so you could get a good view on how to do it. It's really simple, really easy, and the results are just amazing. As long as you go with the same kind of colors, you're going to do fine. I went with very vivid colors, and if you're not sure, if you're not a color person, that's fine. Just go with one person's collection. and you'll be fine. Like, go with earthy colors or go with vibrant colors, go with jewel tones. Those are all tonal families, and you'll find that most people, when they create a collection, kind of go with the same tonal family, and that allows you to get a good overall presentation. So the vibrant colors really worked out for me. Now, when you're jelly printing, you don't always have to use a stencil to create texture. If you just want to create an all-over background, this is a great way to do it. You'll see I didn't actually put any stencils down. I did let it sit there for a while because I wanted to get the full look. So I pulled up everything, and I even got some transferred to the last print I had done. So I'm doing the same thing I did in the last card, where I pull some dots, and I really just liked how that looked. I think overall it really added something, and I don't even know what it added, but it just added another layer in the composition of the prints. So I used a pink and a blue to kind of get a purple. And it goes well in the background. See, I'm using blues and purples, cool colors in the background, which when I use warm colors on the flower, it makes the flower pop. And you'll see that those dots, most of them, again, get hidden, but the ones that don't just kind of focus you into the flower. I wanted in the background the aqua and the white to kind of look like clouds. I'm not sure if it did it in such an obvious way, but it definitely alludes to that. So, one thing I had trouble with on this stencil is knowing where to put the yellow and where to put the green, because I did want the leaves to be green. Of course, I'm going to use the gesso again, and on these ones where I'm doing the flower, I did 1 to 2 layers of the white gesso because I really wanted the flowers to pop. I wanted the flowers to be visually different than the background, and if the background just showed through the flowers, I wouldn't have gotten that. So, on this one, I think I only used 1 layer of gesso, but then I did use 2 layers of this yellow paint. And I'm pulling the yellow with the baby wipe, and every time I changed colors with the baby wipe, I just changed a different area of the baby wipe so that I wouldn't contaminate or overly contaminate, because I wasn't super duper worried about it, just a little bit. Now you'll see I kind of just make the transition from yellow to green, just generally. It it doesn't have to be perfect. Especially with flowers, your mind just kind of fills in any issues. When you see something that looks like a flower, it's going to look like a flower, no matter if there are a few small issues. So I did do everything in progression. I did all the first layers and then all the second layers, but I wanted to show you card by card so you could see my process that way, my thought process. Now I'm adding the green, and it's also a vibrant green. It looks really good, and I just added until I thought that was enough. So I did make sure, and it's something that's nice with these dilution paints, to let it dry between layers, and the dilution paints do dry really quickly. So I knew what colors I wanted on what panels. That's something to really think about before jumping in, is once you get to this point, it's like, okay, what's going to look good on this background? and you want to know that up front. So, it ended up being pretty cool. And I'm adding another layer of this green, and it's almost dry just by that minute or so that it took to get to do the other painting, the other green. So you just add the colors on that stencil until you're ready for the second stencil, and then you add the second stencil. So here I'm going to pull it off, and I'm going to add the next layer. I want to show you how cool these warm colors look on this cool colored background, even just at this point. So instead of the flower, even though you can see a little bit of the dots and stuff behind, since it's so vibrant, it really just pops it out. Next, I'm going to use the orange because I needed a mid-tone, and the orange just fit. So sometimes you can, as long as you get the tonal value, and this orange is a little bit tonally darker than the yellow. And so even though it might not have been the right color for the flower, because it's in the right tone that I'm looking for, the mid-tone, it's going to read really well. So I'm going to next use some darker green, and I think this is grass green, and I just add it. I don't add the butterfly. I felt like there was a lot going on already, and I just didn't want to add it. So I am adding some of the green over, really easy. Next I'm going to dry it again, hitting it with a little bit. And for the final layer on both the flower and the greenery, I'm going to use brown. And I'm doing a very light coat because everything is so bright that I don't want it to look like there's just a really dark outline of where it should be dark. I'm just going to add a little bit because it is translucent, so it'll kind of pick up the color that's underneath it. So I used the same pieces of masking tape throughout the whole process. So you can really get a lot out of just typical, regular, everyday masking tape that I don't think washi tape is quite as good. Now, as I'm putting it on here, you might be freaking out, being like, hey, she's ruining this, this beautiful work she's been working on, and it's going to look terrible. The brown's going to be so dark. But I added barely any brown to my dauber, and so just a hint of the brown gets on, and as opposed to sometimes when I really got a lot down there. So see, it just looks good. So this is the end, and here are all the photos of everything I created. The one you're looking at right now is actually the one I was trying to do from the beginning, but it was really hard to line up the stencil to actually create the flower. I think you can do it, but it just takes a little bit more work, and I was just into having fun. So take a look at these if you want to look at them for longer, see these pictures again. They're on my blog, terrylisacreates.com. And have a wonderful day. I'll see y'all soon. Bye.